Do you believe in the dead coming back to life? Well, if you have doubts, listen to this. In this village, they say the dead return only to bless the living, to feast, to dance, to whisper secrets before vanishing with the first light of dawn. But not all the dead come in peace. First of all, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, like, share, and leave a comment. Thank you. The village of Ìlú Ọ was a peaceful village surrounded by lush forests and sacred rivers. The people lived simple lives, but once a year they had a special event, the Feast of the Dead. It was a time when the ancestors returned to visit their loved ones, and the village came alive with music, dancing, and storytelling. Among the villagers was a beautiful young woman named Títí. Her beauty was like the morning sun, and many men admired her. But her heart belonged to Kunle, the kind and responsible elder son of the late village chief. Kunle's younger brother, Tunde, also loved Títí, but Títí had chosen Kunle, and Tunde couldn't hide his jealousy. He watched them from a distance, his heart burning with anger. Kunle and Tunde were as different as night and day. Kunle was calm, wise, and loved by everyone in the village. Tunde, on the other hand, was hot-tempered and ambitious. He wanted everything Kunle had: the family lands, the respect of the village, and most of all, Títí. One day, Tunde confronted Kunle in the village square. "Why do you always get everything?" he shouted. "You are the eldest, so everyone bows to you, but I am just as good as you." Kunle tried to calm his brother down. "Tunde, we are brothers. There's no need to fight. Let's work together." But Tunde wasn't listening. "You think you are better than me?" he sneered. "But one day, I'll prove you wrong." That night, as the full moon rose, the ancestors arrived. They came in glowing, radiant forms, looking more beautiful than anyone could remember. The villagers cheered and welcomed them with open arms. It was a night of music, dancing, and storytelling. Kunle and Tunde's father, who had passed away years ago, was among the ancestors. He walked up to Kunle and pulled him aside. In a low, serious voice, he said, "Kunle, my son, listen carefully. Beware of your brother. The snake hides in the grass, and the knife cuts from behind." Kunle was confused. "Papa, what do you mean? Tunde is my brother. He would never." But his father interrupted him. "I cannot say more. The dead must not meddle in the affairs of the living. Just be careful." And with that, he faded back into the crowd. Kunle stood there, troubled, but he brushed it off, thinking his father was just being cautious. Little did he know, those words would haunt him later. A few months later, Kunle and Títí got married. It was a grand ceremony, and the whole village celebrated. But Tunde wasn't happy. He watched as Kunle and Títí danced together, his heart filled with bitterness. After the wedding, Tunde's behavior changed. He started drinking heavily and avoided his family. One night, he went to his brother's house to visit Títí when his brother wasn't around. Títí he said, his voice slurring. "You should have chosen me. I would have given you everything." Títí was frightened. "Tunde, please leave me. Leave me alone," she pleaded. But Tunde didn't listen. He grabbed her arm, his eyes filled with anger. Títí fought him off and ran out of the house, crying. Not long after, Kunle fell mysteriously ill. He had terrible stomach pains and couldn't eat or sleep. The village healer tried everything, but nothing worked. Títí stayed by his side day and night, praying for his recovery. Tunde, who had been avoiding the family, suddenly became overly involved in Kunle's care. He brought him food and medicine, claiming it was his duty as a brother. "Here, Kunle," he said one day, handing him a bowl of soup. "This will make you feel better." Kunle drank the soup, but instead of getting better, he grew weaker. Títí grew suspicious. "Tunde, what are you giving him?" she asked. Tunde just smiled and said, "Don't worry, Títí. I'm just taking care of him." Despite everyone's efforts, Kunle's condition worsened. On his deathbed, he whispered to Títí, "Beware of Tunde. He is not what he seems." And with those words, his eyes closed forever. Títí was heartbroken. She couldn't understand what Kunle meant, but she knew something was wrong. The villagers mourned Kunle's death, but Tunde's behavior became even stranger. He took control of the family lands and banished Títí from the compound, forcing her to live in a small, broken hut on the outskirts of the village. Tunde's obsession with Títí grew. One night, he went to her hut, drunk and angry. "You should have chosen me," he shouted, grabbing her arm. Títí fought him off and ran into the forest crying. She just prayed to the ancestors for justice, but no one answered. Months passed and the village prepared for the next feast of the dead. Títí, still grieving, found solace in the thought of seeing Kunle again. But Tunde was nervous. He avoided the preparations and stayed in his house, drinking heavily. Little did they know, the second feast of the dead would bring more than just the return of the ancestors. It would bring a reckoning. The next feast of the dead arrived, and the village was filled with excitement. But Títí, still grieving Kunle's death, hoped to see him again. She prayed to the ancestors, asking for a chance to say goodbye. Tunde, on the other hand, was nervous. He avoided the preparations and stayed in his house, drinking heavily. On the night of the Feast of the Dead, the ancestors arrived. They came in glowing, radiant form, but their presence felt colder, more unsettling. Among them was Kunle, looking more handsome and vibrant than ever. Títí's heart leapt with joy. She ran towards him, tears streaming down her face. "Kunle, I've missed you so much," she said. Kunle smiled and held her close. But something was wrong. That night, Títí and Kunle broke the sacred rule. No mortal must share physical intimacy with a spirit. The next morning, Títí woke up feeling strange. Her body felt heavy, and when she looked in the water, she saw Kunle's face staring back at her. Kunle's spirit had taken over her body. He gave off a sinister laugh, confirming he knew what he had done. After the feast, strange things started happening in the village. Crops that had been healthy the day before withered overnight. Livestock died mysteriously, their bodies found cold and lifeless. The villagers grew fearful, and whispers of a curse spread like wildfire. One morning, a group of children playing near the river ran back to the village, screaming. They claimed they had seen a figure with glowing eyes watching them from the trees. The villagers gathered in the square, their faces filled with fear. Something is wrong. The ancestors are angry with us. Maybe we broke a sacred rule during the feast. We need to consult the elders. The village elders called a meeting to discuss the strange occurrences. They gathered in the chief's compound, their faces grave. Títí, now possessed by Kunle's spirit, watched from the shadows, her eyes glowing faintly. These calamities are not natural. The ancestors are trying to tell us something. We must find out what we have done to anger them, lamented the chief priest. Perhaps someone broke the sacred rule during the feast. We must investigate, said the first elder. The elders decided to consult the oracle to find answer, but before they could act, more strange things happened. Tunde, who had been avoiding the villagers, was the first to experience the full force of the calamities. One night, as he sat alone in his house, he heard a knock on the door. When he opened it, no one was there. But as he turned around, he saw Kunle's face in the mirror, staring back at him with cold, glowing eyes. Kunle, is that you? Leave me alone, Tunde said, terrified. Kunle replied, "You took everything from me, Tunde. Now it's time to pay." Tunde stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. The room was plunged into darkness, and he heard whispers all around him. "You killed me! You killed me!" The next morning, Tunde looked like a broken man. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hand trembled. He avoided the villagers, but they could see the fear in his eyes. Tunde recalled how, out of jealousy and anger, he deceitfully invited Kunle over to settle over some bottle of wine. Then he poisoned the drink so he could get everything that belonged to Kunle. Meanwhile, Títí, now possessed by Kunle's spirit, began to torment Tunde in more subtle ways. She would appear in his dreams, forcing him to relive the moment he poisoned Kunle. In the dreams, Kunle's face twisted into a horrible mask of rage, and Tunde would wake up screaming. One day, Títí approached Tunde in the village square. She smiled sweetly and said, "Tunde, let's forget the past. Come with me." Tunde, drunk and vulnerable, followed her into the forest. In the forest, Títí led Tunde to a clearing. She handed him a cup of poison and said coldly, "Drink this, Tunde. It's time to pay for what you have done." Tunde, confused, hesitated, his hands trembling. Títí, please, what did I do to you? What is wrong, Títí? You took my life, Tunde. Now, you take your own, Kunle said through Títí. Just as Tunde was about to drink the poison, the chief priest and the villagers arrived. The chief priest shouted, "Stop! This is not what Títí would want." Kunle's spirit, speaking through Títí, said, "Stay out of this! He deserved to die." But the chief priest pleaded, "Kunle, listen to me. Revenge will not bring you peace. Let go of Títí's body. She doesn't deserve this." Títí's voice broke through. "Kunle, please, I love you, but this isn't the way." Kunle's spirit hesitated, then finally relented. He left Títí's body, and she collapsed to the ground, exhausted. The villagers held a trial for Tunde. He confessed to poisoning Kunle and was hanged in the village square. The feast of the dead was never held again, and Títí was banished from the village because she had broken the sacred rule of the feast of the dead. And so, the story of the feast of the ancestors teaches us that jealousy and revenge only leads to pain and destruction. For more interesting tales like this, please hit the subscribe button, like, share, and comment. Thank you.